When I was younger, I would think grief is something that you have to avoid at all costs. As you live in this world, you actually see that grief is something that's not like it's not like a one-time bullet that you dodge. It keeps coming back. I was reading statistics and they say most Americans, every 3 years, you'll face something that will cause grief, small or big, like some sort of grief in your life. And that grief could last from 6 months to 2 years. So if you take a average statistic, that means every 2 out of 3 years in your life, that is two-thirds of your life, you're dealing with grief in some way. So it's not something you can brush off. And it's something worth thinking about. Now that could sound very depressing that, wait, I'm going to be grieving for two-thirds of my life. But actually, wouldn't it be nice if grief had something to do, if grief had something that we could use to our advantage? Um, Grief actually comes in waves. It's not even like, you'll get it all one time, you'll deal with it and it's gone. You'll be fine, and then another day it will just hit you. So we really need a strategy to deal with grief. There's a reason, actually, the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, is literally Arjuna Vishad Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's grief. And you might think, what does yoga have to do with grief, actually? But anything that helps facilitate your relationship with Krishna, which helps invoke your original connection with the Supreme, that is yoga. And if your grief can help facilitate that, then that is yoga. So you see, the initial bit of the Bhagavad Gita, first 20 some verses or something like that, just observing the armies. But immediately after, Arjuna starts to express the amount of grief he's feeling and the symptoms of grief he's feeling. And the Bhagavad Gita starts from a point where Arjuna is in intense grief, but that grief makes the way for the world's most amazing questions, which we see and read even 5,000 years later as the Bhagavad Gita. It's a question and answer discussion on how to work through that grief. So grief provides this momentary lens. It's like not a momentary, a little bit more than a moment, but it provides a lens where for a few moments or for a little period, you are detached. Sometimes you might remember like being like upset and then feeling, I want nothing. I just want to be like, you just feel a little aloof, that detachment, that little narrow sense of detachment you get is very powerful. In that little narrow window of detachment, if you fit in, somehow bring in spiritual knowledge, it can act as a stepping stone for great progress in your life. Actually, it is explained 4 kinds of people will turn to spiritual life. And the number one and the highest population in that category is those who are distressed. Dukkha. The world is in Sanskrit and Bhagavad Gita is often called Dukkhalayam. Alaya means home, and Dukkha means grief and problems and miseries, right? So it's a place of misery, but we want to pursue happiness. So is the happiness going to come in the time you're not grieving, or could our grief become the pathway to the greatest kind of happiness if it is backed up with real inquiry? And that's what the Bhagavad Gita is pushing you towards. It says, Dukkheshu anudvignamana. Don't be disturbed when there is dukkha or grief in your life. Your mind has to be stable through that. And sukheshu vigataspriya. That even when there's happiness, you just kind of like, you don't get too caught up in it. It's not such a big deal. It just comes and goes. It's compared to the changing of seasons. You don't get upset if the season changes. Like it's daytime right now. If it becomes cloudy and rain, I'm not going to cry about it. It might spoil my plans of going for a walk, but I won't cry about it. It's the same way happiness and distress come and go, and we don't make a big deal about it because we have transcendental knowledge, and we use both happiness and distress to inquire about that realm where this coming and going is not constantly going on. We want some stability. Our heart yearns for stability. We like it when things are steady. We often, when we're suffering, we'll say, can I not just be happy for a while? We want that stability. The way to have that stability is not in this world of changes. We have to actually have knowledge of spiritual existence, spiritual world, our own spiritual identity. And that's when we can actually start to deal with grief. I mean, there are so many global statistics that actually when the pandemic happened, there was an increase in people's prayers, like the amount of people Googling for prayers to chant or prayers to say during the pandemic skyrocketed. You see the same trend happen around after World War II. You saw the churches filled up, people were praying more. So when there is intense grief, we've seen globally people start to kind of shift to God, because they need some, they have some sense of like, oh, this suffering can't be dealt with by ourselves. So there is that trend we see. But why wait for that? Why, like, but somehow or other, after these big turning to God, then people tend to forget about it. We get happy and then we forget about it. So grief is a beautiful way in which we can actually be a little bit detached from this world and pursue that which is eternal.